Okay.
That was good, huh?
That was very good.
It's 9:06 and we are starting our February 9th meeting of the Barnstable County Commissioners. Please join us in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And also, if you would, join us in a moment of silence while we think about those who have served our country, who are serving our country, and those who have made a sacrifice for giving up their life for our country. Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is public comment, and I see that we actually have an audience here today. Lou, Patty Daly, and Peter Seeloff.
Paul
Seeloff, sorry. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much. First time here.
Oh, it's not your last.
No, oh, not either. I thought I would stop by to talk to the board about an opportunity that we think has developed in Wellfleet, which is our long-term building inspector has left as of December. And the Board of Selectmen in Wellfleet have tasked me with looking at every regional opportunity or intermunicipal opportunity I can find, and obviously the easier ones are the ones where you have openings. Not that that should be your main defining reason for doing something, but honestly it is. So what I thought I'd do is just give the board a little background about what we've been doing and talking about. I've talked to some of the county staff here about this, and maybe get some feedback from the board as well. So the building inspector left in December. I have hired a temporary inspector through at least March, although I was hoping he'd stay a little longer, but I think he'll be out as of March, so I do have a little bit of a time constraint. But I have talked very generally to Sheila Lyons. I've worked with Patty and Paul over at the Cod Commission. I've also talked to Maggie as well about, what are the possibilities? Is there some way of taking this position? We don't need a full-time building inspector in Wellfleet, but we do think, it is a very technical position. So I've talked to, like I said, the different people here in the county, and we've come up with a couple of different scenarios, one is that we've taken our job description and kind of laid on top of it some alternative or extra duties to perhaps take the position, have it become a county position, and then having that person serve and do the needs of Wellfleet, which, like I said, is part-time, and also part-time not only as far as the full year, but actually very part-time in the non-busy parts of the year, such as the off-season. I mean, our ratio is probably maybe a 2/3 position in the summer and then maybe a 1/3 position in the winter, something like that. I mean, and particularly you don't even need people in the office, need a person in the office all the time, you just need a person reachable. So I'll let Patty talk a little bit, but what Patty worked on was the alternative job description, where she took ours and added some stuff to it, and maybe you can tell a little bit what you added to it.
Sure. From the county perspective, we thought that type of position would be useful, particularly at the commission, for a couple of reasons. One is that person could help us to work with the 15 or 14 other building inspectors, do trainings on DRI compliance and referrals, and bolster our relationship with those folks. Secondly, we thought that this person, if they had a LEED certification, could help with working with applicants who came through us to understand how they might achieve some of the LEED standards, which, as you know, are voluntary. But those are two of the kind of countywide assistance that we could see coming out of this type of position.
So what I'd like to do is, get a sense of the board. We're looking at alternatives. I mean, we've been approached by Eastham and actually Brewster as well, though Brewster has stepped back a little bit. But Eastham is very interested in talking with us about perhaps having a sharing relationship with their their building inspector as well. And obviously, my other alternative is to just go to a part-time inspector. I think there is a real opportunity here. I mean, I do have to kind of formalize something so I can bring it back to my board, and you know, so that's one of the reasons I came here. I mean, what Patty said is true. There's actually a couple other opportunities which I looked at the beginning, which is specifically if this person were to come on board, do part-time in Wellfleet, part-time some of these other things, that position could be amended at a later date if another building inspector position opens up at a medium to small sized town, where then that person could be split between the two towns, and we could look to some of these other responsibilities devolving to someone else, or maybe hiring a part-timer. But in other words, having a person who is part-time building inspector with the opportunity to pick up another town if it opens up, it's a lot easier than trying to start. And the hardest step, I think, is the first step. If we have the part-time position and another one opens up and a town is interested in that, then we'd be able to step into that and then work around some of these other opportunities that Patty has talked about.
I think, sorry. One other thing, that could be a fee-for-service position too, so to the extent they had time, they could work in other towns.
Before we
I
start
just want to ask a question.
asking questions, but we have to avoid getting into deliberation.
No, I'm not deliberating, I just want to ask
Go
a
ahead.
question. Based on the article that was in the Cape Cod Times about Nantucket, and their issues regarding the inspectors, where they're planning not to, or to reduce them, I would say probably it's likely that construction has decreased somewhat on the Cape as well, so that we don't see the need in the sense, but I'm saying that doesn't mean that this isn't a good idea to do it. But I guess my question is, in zoning enforcement, if an applicant has to go before a zoning board to get certain conditions when they build, is there, who in your town actually goes back and looks at that property to see whether or not it was built according to what the conditions are?
Generally, that's the building inspector's office. Yeah.
So they pretty much do that?
Yes.
Because in some towns, that doesn't happen.
Well, what's interesting, actually, from what I can tell, Wellfleet is unique in that we're the only town in the Cape where the building inspector actually goes to zoning board meetings all the time and almost acts like a quasi-staff person, because typically that's not done. Typically there's kind of a delineation, but I guess there's a tradition in our town of doing that. It's interesting you bring up the Nantucket situation, because that is an interesting model. Once again, you know, the newspapers, I don't know if they reported everything technically correct, but the concept of creating kind of a code enforcement office is something actually we're looking at very strongly. My health and conservation officer is a very, very sharp person, and I've talked to her to actually be the leader of that office, because if we do go to a part-time person, or even if it's a contract relationship, we still would need somebody to be the manager or supervisor of that. So that's something we've talked about. And the other thing is, which I haven't really brought up yet, is the financial part of that. I mean, you know, this should not be a substantial financial negative for the county. I think it should be neutral or positively positive, probably positive, because, you know, I have an allotment, obviously an appropriation in my budget for a full-time building inspector. So my goal is to save some of those funds, but also I know there's going to be an expenditure for the position, whether it's within the town or working with the county or something like that. So at least at one level, it should not be a negative financial hit for the county. It should be a benefit. And clearly, in my opinion, long-term, it will be a substantial benefit for everybody involved. It's always, when you do these type of things, sometimes at the beginning there's a little bit of a hit. In this case, I don't think there would be, because we are taking the position and ratcheting it down. So, and we also could, some of the things that Patty talked about could be done slowly over time too, you know, because it's going to take a while to bring somebody in who has some of these skills or whatever, and maybe they wouldn't necessarily focus initially on some of these alternative things, but would build into that, let's say.
Well, my comment, I think it's a great opportunity. You know, it's kind of like a seed that could lead, that can go in various directions. Initially, perhaps meeting your needs, and then maybe expanding to some other way that we haven't even totally foreseen yet. But I think the opportunities that Patty talks about are very real, and they're issues that should be addressed by building inspectors. So I would suggest that we put this on the agenda formally.
Well, I actually, if I might, I was going to say, you don't need to deliberate anything. I think what you can do is kind of give the blessing for go ahead. There's a lot of details we sort of need to work out. You're not asked to take an action right now. What
Right.
you'll be asked to do once that time comes, the action will be you'll approve a personnel paper. And then that's the time that we can put it on the agenda, put it on our thing. But right now you don't need to do that. I think we need to, I do have a question. It's kind of a joint question, and it's sort of Paul, because you're going to be picking up at least 1/3 to 2/3 of the cost of this, it seems, between sort of March and June 30th. So in this year's budget, do you have the wherewithal to pay for those services for a building inspector, or is that something we're going to have to?
It's not anticipated in our budget as filed. So I think what we need to do is have some conversations about where those resources might be,
Okay.
where we might be able to locate them, or whether we can stagger the relationship with Wellfleet to cover it through the next fiscal year and then accommodate that in the budget.
Or do it through another budget
Yep.
piece from the county?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that detail we need to work out. You obviously have some money available for the fiscal year, maybe that could be helpful
Yeah, yeah,
in
it should-
sorting out this other budget
Right.
issue.
Right, I mean, once again, my only,
But you need it sooner rather than later.
well,
you're
yeah, I
talking
mean, it's
about.
not like immediately, but, to some extent, probably the best thing for me to do is to, by the end of, middle of March, end of March, have a framework, because then I would modify my budget before it
For
goes to
next
town
year.
meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so our drop dead date is around the end of March?
Middle to end of March, at least conceptually, I would say, yeah. And, like I said, I guess what Mark is saying is accurate. Well, I guess we want to inform the board and then have a blessing to really sit down with staff and drill deep. I mean, if you thought it was dead on arrival, then we wouldn't spend any time on it.
Yeah, and I think the next step was we need to come up with a memorandum of understanding, basically, on how this is going to work and what proportion they're going to use and what proportion the commission is going to use for the DRI stuff. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Shirley, do you have any questions?
No, I have actually heard this proposal, and I encourage Paul to come to explain it.
All right.
If the lead piece plays a role, maybe we can hit Maggie up for some money.
Okay, so at this point, we've heard your proposal. I think there's a general feeling that in this preliminary stage, it's worthwhile to take, the next few steps. Task Mark with following up on this and then advising us where this is and give us a progress report.
Yeah.
Say this is, perhaps by the end of February.
What's that, a couple weeks? Yeah. I don't have a calendar in
It's
front of
the
me.
9th.
2 Wednesdays from now, maybe we'll bring back a draft.
Okay, that's the
MOU.
end of February.
That'll be the next step.
Okay.
And a funding
Sounds
plan, I
good.
guess,
Great.
are the two pieces that we
I think
need.
it's a great thing.
Paul, thank you for coming.
Good, yes, thank you. Thanks for
Excellent.
doing all the legwork ahead of time.
No problem, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. And Patty.
Now, before Patty leaves, as you see this immense pile of your signing materials, there are 2 things in there that maybe we could just brief you guys on, and those are 2 ordinances on the regional policy plan that were just passed by the Assembly, 1102 and 1103. So if I could just ask her to kind of give you a summation of what's in those.
1103 amends our regional land use vision map. I'm happy to report by adding the town of Dennis and a portion of the town of Bourne. So it's, this map is becoming more filled in, and as towns move forward and identify where they want to grow and what areas they want to preserve. And then the accompanying amendment to Chapter H of our regulations is to allow the town of Bourne to identify their growth incentive zone for only a portion of the town, not the whole town. So they looked at the Buzzards Bay portion, essentially, and were able to map that side of the canal.
Yes, I remember Tom Garino speaking to us about that when we were in Bourne, which I think makes a lot of
Do you have any
sense.
questions about this?
No, because we heard.
And I
Right.
think I was there when it, which was the one that went to the Assembly? This was at the Assembly.
Those are all after the Assembly. Those are
Yes.
executing the ordinances,
Right,
yeah.
I think I'd heard the presentation there. Okay.
Anything else going on at the commission? I think we should know.
We have a solid waste advisory committee at 10 this morning. Solid Waste Advisory.
Oh, solid waste.
Contract Advisory Committee this morning at 10.
That's
Well,
getting a lot of attention these days.
Just to be clear, the scope is everything, not just that one particular application.
Okay.
You think he knows what you mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's code.
So last week was last week was a good week. We started off with a good joint meeting of the Planning Committee and Regulatory Committees to discuss land-based wind turbines, controversial issue moving forward. I think we're meeting with the State Clean Energy Center this afternoon. And I think we're going to produce some regulations that are going to do exactly what we want them to do, which is to not impede distributed generation and appropriately sized land-based wind, and provide some regional review for some of the larger commercial scale turbines. So there'll be more on that soon. And then Friday we finished with the Ocean DCPC this discussion. The policy committee made up of elected officials from all 15 towns. We had a really good discussion there, so that's on track for producing an ordinance hopefully in a June timeframe. So that was a good meeting. We had a 2-day workshop with IBM the week before last. Very informative on our Smarter Cape Cod initiative, so we're going to have more to discuss about that particular initiative going forward. And NSTAR, the ad hoc committee report is out, and I think that's the way that I read the report, and it was structured really to educate people what the current regulatory framework and status is, and the role that federal government, state government plays in regulating those chemicals that are used, herbicides, pesticides. The Commission has finished our mapping project, so we negotiated with NSTAR last year, a 1-year moratorium. It allowed us to go out and do the mapping process, get GPS, so we worked with NSTAR for the last year to do that. So I'm confident that the maps that are represented in the yearly operating plans from NSTAR are accurate, and that public and private drinking water supplies will be protected as it moves forward. Last year we had considered possibly using a DCPC as part of a ban on this, but up front it was determined by legal that there are many issues in this area of federal preeminence, state preeminence, but more importantly that a targeted DCPC in the utility rights of way would be holding that utility to a higher standard than we hold other federal agencies that own significant parts of the Cape on both ends, and state facilities that have property, municipalities that have property and vegetation management plans and licensed pesticide applicators in the towns, as well as residential use. And so there was a complete, I don't think we would have stood a chance, quite frankly, in court, trying to hold NSTAR to a higher standard than the rest of us.
Okay. That brings up a question that suggests that the ability of the Cape Cod Commission to institute a DCPC is not limited to one specific operation, but could be expanded to include the whole Cape. We've heard this from the Association for the Protection of Cape Cod
Yes.
over and over again, that we do have the ability to nominate an area
Yes.
for it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just NSTAR.
Right.
So the question comes, is if, and I guess you'd have to, since the report was not submitted to the commissioners, it was put in the paper, I only know basically what I read in the paper. The question comes,
You didn't receive a copy?
Let's say, if as it's suggested, there's a continuation in the paper, from Leo Kokonis, that we have a continuing committee, it's hard for me to understand where an appointed committee without technical resources should be independent of the staff resources that we have. And that I've always looked at the fact that we have a water department with a hydrologist, and that we have access to, let's say, to an understanding of what hazardous materials are. that it becomes a question that rises out of this as to whether or not the Cape Cod Commission should take some of its ability to apply its authority with regard to regulating the whole matter of this type of use on the Cape or not. So that's that's a question that seems to arise out of what public concern is about these things.
Yes, and I think it's a good question. What I would say as it relates to the report is I've always viewed the report as sort of that initial survey to get stakeholders together, to get them all educated to a certain point. But it's really only the first step in the process, and I think we all agree that more study is necessary. We should continue to look at this as a potential threat. The irony, though, that you bring up as it relates to the DCPC bill is that we could do a Cape-wide DCPC and probably ban herbicides, pesticides, maybe some fertilizers too, out there, and that would apply to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The only people that might be able to escape the clutches of that DCPC would be utilities, like the railroad, which has a federal preemption, and like NSTAR. So the only person we wouldn't be able to hold to that higher standard is NSTAR.
Well, indeed, making that distinction.
There's an irony to
understanding the ironic quality of what you're saying is something that the public, I think, has to.
Yes.
Excuse me. Has to understand and accept.
And part of this is, if NSTAR agreed tomorrow not to spray herbicides on the rights of way, we would still have a big problem. A big problem if we're concerned about the putting chemicals on the ground in proximity to drinking water supplies and residents. So what it calls for, and I think this is what the ad hoc committee sets up, is a comprehensive look. I think if we had proper resources, the county could engage in an effort to quantify and aggregate how many pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers we use Cape-wide. And we could probably incorporate into the regional policy plan a plan for reducing those over time. And we would make much greater progress towards promoting public health and protecting the drinking water supply with that approach than we would by targeting any single user.
I think that's the guidance that that I would ask for as far as going forward. And I think that one of the things you could do for me and for the other commissioners perhaps is to give us some idea of what these resources would be that would be needed, and what type of what type of support you need in order to accomplish that.
Yeah, we are in discussions with NSTAR and with other sort of interested parties, and I think very soon we'll be able to come back to you with a proposal of sorts.
Okay, and very soon is
hopefully within 2 weeks.
Okay, I think that as far as addressing what I saw in the paper and taking a closer look at perhaps what the motions that came out of the committee, since it was an advisory committee, I just am. And this time I'm only speaking for myself. I think it would be very important that we know that we have, the ability within county technical staff to examine this issue very carefully and come out with what I would call the kind of report that you're talking about.
Yeah, I would be very careful about how we characterize that, though, because to the extent that you want to do original science, risk analysis and look at mixing chemicals and I think that is what some people in the ad hoc committee suggest, then we don't have the resources, and I would suggest maybe even the state doesn't have the resources.
We do have the ability to measure,
yes,
to monitor, and to advise.
And you will see, Bill, as we have done in the last year, that we will come forward with a plan to protect public health and to protect the drinking water supply to the full extent of our jurisdiction. What the Commission's not interested in doing is wasting time talking about things that we have no jurisdiction over. It's not an effective use of our resources. I think at times you have advocates who tend to see the world in black and white. You're either with us or against us, and it leads to an overly narrow perspective that at times sort of engenders a false sense of infallibility, and at times promotes results that do more harm to the people they allege to defend. And I think we could have spent the last year complaining about NSTAR, and we would have been left with substandard maps in case the vegetation management plan goes as forward. And so we would have been negligent in our duty not protecting public health and the drinking water supply. And so,
Excuse me, did this group come up with a plan? Or did they come up with a recommendation?
Recommendations.
So they didn't come up with a comprehensive plan. I
No, no.
believe that still falls within our
oh yeah,
responsibility.
no, and I'm not saying it, but what, I think some of the criticism of the commission over the last year has been that we weren't going far enough, we didn't agree with some sort of ban, and what got lost in the shuffle is we analyzed every bit of jurisdiction we have, and I've been asking the legislature for 12 months that they give us more authority on these banned substances, on the ability to ban some of these substances. I don't think there is enough local control. Whether it's regional or whether it's municipal is irrelevant. And the fact that you had such a heated emotional discussion here locally, you got a lot of hard feelings, a lot of bad blood associated with that now, when really the effort needs to be directed towards Beacon Hill and towards Capitol Hill, for the approach, because that's the only people that have any ability to do anything about it on the level that seems to be requested by some of the advocates that are involved in the process is at that level. It's not here.
Okay, I have a great concern that we would have the appearance of kicking the can down the road or up, or up the hill. I think that.
But we can't do anything about it, Bill. Why spend a year debating whether we should have a ban when we can't ban it?
I think that we have a monitoring process in place that we don't have results from. What is the results of those, for example? Because I didn't see, in the article in the paper, it said that those results have yet to be delivered.
Well, yeah, there is no monitoring plan currently.
Well, aren't there monitoring of wells in Eastham?
Not for the particular, not for some of the particular contaminants that they're talking about there, and some of the advocates when we're discussing putting together a monitoring plan, which we, I hope we will have, but we need the support of the state commissioner of agricultural resources in order to do that. And I think we have begun those discussions. It includes our new senator in that discussion to get that monitoring plan in place. But the state monitors these particular contaminants at UMass Amherst, and the integrity of that laboratory has been questioned by some of the local advocates. They want it done someplace else. And so at some point, we're going to do everything that we can do to exercise common sense to protect public health and the drinking water supply. We've acted within our jurisdiction, but to point fingers at people as not caring enough or not doing enough when they have no jurisdiction, at that point, the only role that we have is advocates to change the law to give us the authority to be as effective as people want us to be.
Well, indeed, if we represent the people, we have to represent their interest, and I think that's what we're speaking to. And you're suggesting that you'll come back in a couple of weeks with.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. We are in discussions now, and I'm hopeful that we will have, I think, an extraordinarily comprehensive plan that I think is the next step of the county's ad hoc committee going forward. That should have a broad base of support, and I would suggest we'll put best management practices in place on the Cape that are stricter than any other that exist in the country. And that in addition to that, we can identify some additional resources so that we can, as part of the regional policy plan, identify and aggregate these potential contaminants that are being used on the Cape now and come up with a regional and measurable reduction over time.
In the look at that, the one thing that appears to be missing from my conversations with people who have shared what the test methodologies have been is that the analysis of the effect of single items and not the analysis of matters in combination with others is one that seems to be a gap in this process. And in terms of the monitoring and a monitoring plan, I hope that takes that into account.
Well, we absolutely need the monitoring plan. We need the states to support us in that, and I hope they do.
Okay, and so as part of this, perhaps would be some correspondence to Senator Wolf to make him aware of our interest in getting his support in this, and also get his opinion as to what the likelihood of, let's say, of actually getting something through the legislature that would support this.
If I would urge the commissioners today to write a letter to ask Senator Wolf and every member of the delegation to do two things. One is to support a monitoring program that is sponsored by the Department of Agricultural Resources, NSTAR as a participant in that, and the Cape Cod Commission. We've had some of those initial discussions. That's going on now. I would urge you to write it to the delegation and have them support that. More importantly, I would urge the delegation to consider legislation that gives us some authority over banned substances. We are, through the monitoring program, we will, for the first time, be able to start to generate some original science and add some value to this discussion. And I see no reason why the Cape can't be a pilot program for taking the next step on analyzing these potential contaminants, and certainly setting a national standard for reducing the amount of herbicides, pesticides, and chemicals in general that we put into the ground.
And having heard your description of it, perhaps you'd be kind enough to draft a letter for us that we could look at and perhaps do that.
Yes.
That's what happens when you make a suggestion.
May I ask
Go
a
ahead.
question? Back to the monitoring, we've been 2 years without herbicide spraying in Eastham, down in the Outer Cape areas, and there are monitoring wells. Is there going to be testing? I mean, we're under the impression that there's going to be a good baseline now, that there has not been no spraying to take samples at this time before, if they do commence.
We've had discussions with NSTAR on the monitoring program,
Okay.
and we need a broader monitoring program where I'm most interested in getting a baseline in those communities where there's been no spraying.
Right.
And this is of value to NSTAR
Exactly.
before they begin, so that we can tell whether any of their activities in the future are contaminating these wells in any way. So they're actually very supportive because they're very confident in the vegetation management plan that they have.
And,
Well, this is kind of an aside, but I did attend a few of the meetings of the Vegetative Management Committee, and they did incredible work. They really did. I mean, I'm really impressed with the work they did and with the recommendations that they've come up with. But I would strongly suggest that someone edit the recommendations. I mean, it is a government document, and it's going to be viewed by lots of people, and it needs some editing, if you know what I mean.
Who
If you
wrote the
have-
report?
Well, I think that's immaterial at the moment. And I mean, with all due respect to the writer of the report, whoever that may have been, it needs to be edited properly, because there are some misnomers in there, and and I'd be happy, you may want to look at that as the chairman. And,
if I may, I agreed with that, and those edits, people reviewed that and made language changes to make sure that the intent.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
I understand that, but
I'm talking
then
about-
when I read it in its final form, I wanted to edit it as well, to be more clear, to be a little bit more specific, because there are areas there you're not quite sure what they're saying, but it was voted as is,
No,
and it was
but
held.
no, I'm talking about grammar and
Yeah,
spelling.
right.
I'm not talking about intent.
But I mean, the way that I understand it, this is an ad hoc committee appointed by you. They will make a report to you. I think
Right.
that is
Well,
what the report is.
that hasn't happened.
But when the report gets to you, I think you...
No, I think the
And we
report
can-
was sent to us, but it was sent to the papers at the same time.
Right, but when you get the report, I think you can finalize
do
the
that,
report. You can
yeah.
do whatever you want to it.
Yes,
So
we
you
can.
can have
I
it,
think we should do
before it
that,
has
because
the
it's an
imprimatur
official-
of Barnstable County put on it,
Report.
you can change the report.
I
So,
think that would be an appropriate thing for us to
Yes.
do.
Oh, yeah.
I
I mean,
agree.
it's a document, it's an important document, it might be reviewed by lots of people, it's representative of the county, and it should be representative of the
and
county.
it might be consistent with some of the other plans that we're working on for stage 2, so maybe we could take that ad hoc report, you can discuss it, you can discuss changes you might want to make to it, and then when you have a final report, I think that would lead somewhat seamlessly, hopefully, into this phase 2 recommendation that we're
But
talking
in the meantime, I think that your thought about writing that letter is
Yes.
It's a very
We'll do
good
that
very
today.
idea.
important,
I
very
would
important
agree
one
with
that should go forward
We'll do
as
that
soon as
today.
possible. Okay, does anybody have any other questions on this matter?
No.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
we going to have the budget hearing first?
IT budget, 9:30.
Yeah.
Hello, guys.
Good morning.
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 I need help with my phone. And my email. I still can't get onto my email.
Me either, so we should talk about that.
Yeah. Maybe after this, we'll take a break and you can bring us in.
You're not getting email?
I can't log on. I know that I haven't changed it. I know what it is. It won't go, it won't do it, and I.
So you want your money?
Yeah, that's right. Let me know what everybody's saying.
Exactly.
So you know John, obviously, and you know Billy Travers.
Yes, I do.
obviously.
Yes.
Yep. My apologies, Peter Carlson was going to be here to join us, but once we had to reschedule, he had a commitment he could not reschedule. So basically, in terms of our whole budget process and preparing the IT budget for you this year, one of the things that I did do
Yes, IT.
Yep. Was basically vet the entire budget with Peter.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mark, could you hand us this?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Pat, you need one?
Here we go.
It'd be easier to have it than to go through this.
Those were my last two extras, so.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yep, no problem, no problem. Was try to vet the entire budget with Peter Carlson, get an independent look. That is one of the things that I did in implementing the strategic technology assessment, is hire him to help with implementation from a point of view of making sure that we were conforming with the report that he wrote, but also operational advice and those sorts of things. So, this entire budget as it is something that, I've gone over in depth with Mark, I've gone over in depth with Peter, in terms of the priorities that we're trying to set forth for this year. Now, in terms of the budget, there are really two major new requests kind of sections, basically. That is personnel requests and some major capital improvement requests. In both cases, they are a combined response to implementing the strategic technology assessment, as well as certain operational things that simply are coming up at the same time. And that's really, in terms of a budget that, exceeds basically 100% of last year's request. That's the basis of where we're coming from. There's a convergence here of problems and opportunities, as it was. So I would, if you'd like me to just go ahead, I would introduce basically a little bit of background that I've presented to you on the personnel recommendations.
It's in there, I think they have that, it's sort of a memo that you put together.
Yes,
That's
yes,
maybe a
it is,
good
yeah.
outline
Yep.
to
It is a
start.
good outline.
Yep. Basically, what we did this year, FY11, in implementing the strategic technology assessment, is hire a full-time contractor to help on the help desk. Ryan Johnson is somebody that I know Bill Doherty has worked with, and perhaps some of you have as well, in order to give us, we were trying to accomplish two things. One, get a base number of hours that could cover the number of requests that we had, and two, one of the another piece of the strategic technology assessment that we needed to implement immediately was to take myself as the IT director and the person running this department off of day-to-day help desk type of things. And we needed to do that immediately for really the entire plan to be able to be implemented at all. So we hired Ryan Johnson last year. One of the first thing that we're asking for is that we're asking for an additional position to turn his contract position into an employee's position. So that's our first
That's the
recommendation.
tall guy, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Yep. Yep. The second piece of our recommendation is an admin assistant position. This is something that came up in the very first meeting that Peter Carlson and I had when we were still developing the strategic technology assessment. It was something that we both came to the table and realized was absolutely crucial. And with the tools that you've given me in the last year and what I'm looking for this year, it becomes even more crucial in terms of we're going to be managing these enterprise contracts, whether it be internet access, web hosting, antivirus applications on a enterprise basis for all county departments, and many of those we already are. It does require more admin work to pull all of that off. Right now, all of that's, again, being done by me. Mark can attest, we had an issue with one of our vendors, Comcast, who provides internet access. We have probably 7 different accounts at 5 different locations. Since I brought that issue to Mark, I have probably spent 15 hours on the phone with Comcast trying to negotiate what is in essence a billing problem, a misapplication of our payments, basically. Just to give you one example, of the amount of time that it takes for things. We had a request from Cape Light for a software upgrade, enterprise in their department. As you know, they're not that big a department, 13 people or whatever, maybe 20 computers. No problem. We go ahead, we process the software, the request, and we send it into the vendor to order the software, and basically I had to sit here and wait for the proper processing of that for 8 weeks instead of what should have been a two-day turnaround. Basically, again, 10 to 15 hours on the phone with vendors. Why isn't this order processed? Where is it going? Are there any problems with it? Going from one person to another. Operationally, the admin stuff is still bringing me down in this year, even with the changes that I've made, and that's why when I sat down with Mark and we went over this budget, at first he was like, well, what's the real, how could this be? But it really does have an impact on service delivery. It has an impact on my ability to run the department and move it where we all say we want to take it, because I'm kind of bogged down in this stuff. So that's the basic background in terms of why I'm looking for an admin position. I am asking.
Before you leave that, were these things that actually Peter had brought into the that overall report that we saw about a year
It's
and
the
a half?
strategic
There are some things.
yeah.
There are some things that were, and there's some things that were not. In terms of operationally, he did set certain guidelines for what the IT director should be doing, which basically comes down to literally only directing the department, working with you folks, department heads, county commission, county commissioners, Mark and Maggie. There's just not, because of the amount of applications we have running, the amount of tracks and projects in terms of moving these departments forward, there's really no time for an IT director to do anything differently. Again, that was another piece when Peter and I sat down and talked about the report. We were in full agreement on, that's how we had to shape this and change this IT director's position. So I've been looking to do that. He did make recommendations in terms of the staff that are on the help desk, that we balance their ability to respond to problems versus when we need technical expertise to help a department with a project. And we have tried to, to the best we possibly can with the number of staff that we have, implement that this year too. For instance, Chris Burt is one of our technical support specialists, and one of the projects that he basically is shepherding or leading on is the strategic technology assessment requirement that we take the county's 25 websites and move them to a host an offsite host that we've chosen. And I think we have something like 23 out of the 25 sites moved or something like that. But that requires a significant amount of concentrated effort, for which during this period of time I've taken Chris off the help desk. And it totally makes sense, but it's also operationally, it's the only way we can take this diverse set of tasks that we're called to manage and or execute and do them is to say, okay, so for this period of time you're off the help desk, in order to do that. So those were the basic recommendations. Operationally, he didn't, when I talked to him, and this was one thing I was going to specifically have him address here today, my staff request is pretty much exactly what it was when I sat here a year ago and requested that from you. He knew what my staff request was going to be before he wrote his report for you folks. And he, not only did he endorse it, we had conversations about it, and it was what made sense for the size of our organization and for the complexity of our organization. But he basically handed that off to me because he knew what I was going to say and he's like, go for it. And one of the reasons that I wanted to invite him in here today was basically kind of to give you that sort of background. We very easily could have asked him to really do that analysis and pitch that to you folks. And what I'm saying is basically everything that we did last year, is my staff request is based on his report and what we talked about. And this year, Peter and I, is one of the things, since he's working for IT now, is we have gone over that and in a fine-tooth comb again. Not everything that I want to discuss, but we are entirely in agreement that this is still what we need now to be successful for you folks and for all the county departments. So in essence, yes, it's something that he's in agreement on. Is all of it highlighted in the report specifically? No, only certain conceptual things are, because he thought that was more operational and that was more between us in essence, basically.
Before we leave this subject, there's always a question as to what the value is of vertical integration of a function within an organization, and then outsourcing those parts that can be outsourced.
Yep.
You function as a system administrator, essentially, and in terms of let's say internal hardware support, there are companies. In the interest of full disclosure, my niece owns a company like that basically will give that kind of support for an organization in order to do that.
Yep. Yeah, and on an application by application basis, we're looking at where we need to outsource things. One of the things Mark can attest to that we outsourced since the strategic technology assessment came in was a level of support for the specialized functions that go into the Cape Light Compact's call center. Basically, putting a vendor in place that A, when possible, works directly with them, and B, allows us to not have to make operational changes and high-level changes to that specific set of applications, but gives us a vendor that can do those and frees up our time. So definitely, that is something we continue to look at and are going to be looking at even more. We are in the midst now. I have a draft RFP in front of purchasing for getting IT and thereby the county more support for our phone system, basically. That is, first off, higher level functions, so we don't have to sit there figuring out when we want to advance the system how to do something that we may not have experience with, not take that time, basically, But also, I'm trying to write the support contract in such a way that if we operationally have, let's say we needed to change configuration of 15 phones, and that was something that didn't balance with our other workload of the day, that was something we could kind of kick off to the vendor as well, is what I'm trying to do with the contract as well. So that's the second piece of what I'm trying to do.
So what, if I understand this correctly, what you're doing is not asking for relief from the monitoring of the phone system as much as in terms of internal maintenance responsibility, but having it written into a vendor contract that when the phones are installed and configured, that they would be responsible for maintaining them, like a lease agreement with a copy machine.
Somewhat similar. I'm trying to be a little more flexible with it because I'm trying to balance a bunch of different needs with this contract. If we, let's say, in July, I sat down with Dave Murphy and they decided that for some strategic reason they needed to be on our phone system. Well, that's great. That would still be a decision that IT and the Registry of Deeds would make. But then what we would do is, instead of sitting down and kind of drawing up all the plans, we'd bring the vendor in at that point. We'd look at the vendor in terms of implementation And then in terms of at least monitoring recommendations, if not doing monitoring, yes. In other words, if we're doing monitoring on certain day-to-day functions on the phone system, I want them to be reports, basically, that I can have somebody generate out of the system, and we can go through in a few minutes and say, okay, operationally everything's working appropriately. So basically, it's a little more complicated than that. But if I had to go with a one-word answer, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and we're looking at some other things too. You just to briefly address, you had mentioned, network and certain other administration. Just a couple things on that, and not to digress too much. But one of the other things that I did, and I actually started doing before the strategic technology assessment, is taking that network administration responsibility kind of again away from me, knowing that I had to be basically IT director, and basically what I've been doing is funneling all of that over to Billy, who basically came to us 5 years ago with a network administration background already. We hired him as the county's assistant network administration person, so he was to have some of those responsibilities anyway. But basically he's now taking the lead on most of that stuff. And also, that again is not something that, because of the diversity of the number of buildings we have, the type of network we have, the services running over it, is not really something that one person can handle. So in my consulting requests for FY12, what a large amount of that money, probably $40,000 to $50,000, is expected to be consultants that are going to work directly with Billy in terms of managing certain projects, expanding, doing various things out as we connect Fire Training Academy to our network, having the labor and the expertise behind Billy so that we can realistically accomplish all of the things that we need to do. To be honest, we have a list of projects, some involving email. We've wanted to do certain things, scheduling, automating calendars that would schedule rooms like this, book rooms and things like that. A lot of those things are 80 to 90% completed by Billy and I. They're projects that go back a couple of years.
Speaking of projects going back a couple of years, when will Wi-Fi be available in this building?
Well, what we're doing is I sat down and Mark and talked about this in the I believe it's the wide area network proposal for FY12. What we have is $20,000 of that request, which is entirely dedicated to what we're calling an enterprise wireless piece of our network. And the reason why we had to strategically do this is because we have, I'm sure you folks know, we have 4 or 5 or 6 wireless spots on our network. Some of them are for public access, like over in the Cape Cod Commission. Others we have access to our network, things that need much higher degree of security in them, whether that be at RDO. We have something like that, very rudimentarily, if that's a word, set up at the Cape Cod Commission as well. But before we could get into any more of this, it's painfully obvious to me that if we do this piecemeal, we're going to have something that's unmanageable for us. Mm-hmm. So basically, we're asking for the $20,000 to come in. We're going to kind of like rip out all the wireless hardware that's everywhere in the county, replace it all with light devices, with a central management system, and some of that money is for consultants to come in here and do the light configuration. So really, all they have to teach us to maintain it is basically one configuration for one device, no matter where it is in the building. And they can come in and they can do some sizing evaluation. At the Commission, one of the problems we've always had is coverage in that building. In that building, it's kind of the shape of the building. In this building, coverage would be an issue because of, there's stone in certain places, there's vaults in other places, and those types of things. Mm-hmm. So, we would have a vendor come in here and fit, okay, well, to offer wireless in this building, let's say the number one reason for that would be for the county commissioners, whether you're meeting here or in rooms 11 and 12, that you had access for your laptops basically wirelessly. Well, that might take 3 different spot devices in order to talk back to the central wireless point in this building. And what we want is one vendor to come in here and size that and identify all those locations for us.
And so the question is, Bill, when?
In FY12, if we get the appropriation of funds.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about in the Cape Cod Commission. You'll find that in the back of the building you get Wi-Fi, in the front of the building you don't.
Yeah.
So it's, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
We have Open Cape going forward here, and hopefully they're on track and getting done what they need to get done. Is there any thought of how this is all going to work with them in the future, and are they involved in any of these conversations with Peter, in sort of so that you're not building this whole system that could then have to be dismantled because you have
Right.
an easier point source?
Yeah, absolutely there are discussions. I kind of let you know, within the last month, IT has met with Open Cape probably 3 different times. At first it started because they were getting ready to renovate the building, and there were certain operational issues that we had identified and wanted to vet in front of them to see if they were in fact issues. And second, we wanted to get I invited Dan Gallagher to come in and speak to the entire IT department and just kind of give an overview of all of the various services that they'll be offering. And all of these efforts were extremely helpful. As a result, what I've kind of decided to do, we have mostly myself and Billy and Chris Burt have a much better idea of what Open Cape is offering and what Open Cape isn't offering, what is free, and what we will want to contract with them for. So we've decided how we're going to approach that. And I talked with Dan about this last week. I'm going to invite Dan to come over and kind of do the same presentation with Peter. And Peter's going to brainstorm with us, and we're going to basically come up with an Open Cape plan and how it relates to everything. And I want to deliver that within hopefully 12 weeks. Sit down with Mark and say, okay, this is where I think we're going because of Open Cape. In terms of the majority of our FY12 budget, I don't see much changing because of it.
Oh, I understand. Right.
So
Just saying that as long as you're planning with that resource in mind in the future, so that we're not overpaying for something that we're not going to use
Exactly.
in the future.
No, absolutely.
I mean, the primary goal right now is to figure out, because they're ready to renovate the building, what needs to be preserved and what doesn't.
Right.
Right.
And if they run into a conduit full of cable, can they rip that out or can they not rip that out?
Right.
And
Especially with this, because the sheriff has his communication tower equipment in the basement.
Yes.
That's
Right.
kind of a crucial
And that's still
piece.
functional?
Oh,
Yes.
it's still functional,
It's
yeah,
all
it's
still- that's
absolutely
there.
crucial.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we brokered a meeting last Monday. What IT basically did was coordinate a meeting where we had everybody from Open Cape actually, and the Sheriff's Department and ourselves in there to physically walk through parts of that building. And the wonderful part about this is that we turned out being correct, and I'm not saying that for any other reason, but we identified things that were not previously identified that Open Cape has to work around, and by bringing the sheriff to the table, we were able to identify from the myriad of things that he had that were kind of outside of the scope of that radio room, what was really needed to be preserved and why.
Right.
So it was a rousing success from my point of view, and Dan Gallagher was very appreciative that we were able to pull that off.
Right.
We had, I think, 5 different people from the Sheriff's Department come down in order to do that.
And I'm sure it was enlightening for them as well, because
Yes.
now they can sort of see where all of this will fit for them as well.
Exactly, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so getting back to the budget,
Yep.
where are we on that?
Yeah. So, in terms of the personnel recommendation, the last piece, well, not really the last full-time position that I'm asking for is one more additional technical support specialist. And that is somewhat, because here's basically what's happening. Except now, for a year, I've sat here and said, we have certain issues with baseline security, in the Registry of Deeds. And what we have done in the last 12 weeks is, I actually, another one of the reasons I hired Peter Carlson is to conduct the same kind of assessment of computer functionality within the Registry of Deeds that we had done in the other 14 county departments. And in doing that, Peter has backed all of my recommendations, and we've set a work plan in force that Jack Mead and Dave Murphy have agreed to, where we will basically be handling baseline security at the desktop level now for the Registry of Deeds as well, where there's somewhere between 50 and 70 computers. and desktop management as well. The security issues that are there, the registry now totally understands where IT is coming from. It's something that we cannot ignore. But basically, when I talk to when you talk to IT staffing firms, if you're going to add a base of an additional 50 to 70 computers, into your management, that effectively usually is about another FTE in order to accomplish that. So that's kind of the reason for the third, staff person that we're asking for. Other than that, what I plan to do with that position.
Excuse me, we have 179, 180 people work for us, and you're saying we're going to add, you're proposing we would be adding 50 computers or replacing 50 computers?
No, we would be adding between 50 and 70 computers to what we manage as a department.
I see. And how is that management taking place now?
Frankly, I don't want to say
Yeah.
it's not happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not
So
happening.
people need to know,
Right.
when we propose a budget, I
Right.
think people need to know
That-
what your opinion is.
Right, and that's why, and finally, we have the registry on board with an understanding of what. It took a while, but, I'm really, really pleased that we're here, because obviously it's extremely important and vital to our future. And I think as you folks, because Mark kind of told me, the registry, was kind of talking about how our interactions have worked, and helped to improve them over the last year. And from this, I've already seen, we've had several requests for our advice on additional efforts at improving electronically the way the registry does things in the last 3 months. So, I think it's opened a door that's going to be tremendously beneficial for the county in terms of interacting IT and the registry for a lot more reasons than just security. But security is the baseline it's all built on. We can't necessarily accomplish everything that they want to without having a network that is at least as secure as every other network in the county, if not more secure.
And I think Jack did allude to that there was better relationships in his, he felt
Yep.
comfortable going forward.
Yep. So, in essence, that's the staff request with the exception of we are asking for, I think like $6,000 basically so we could set up a summer internship program. The reality of what happens in IT is most computers, for instance, most big projects are still accomplished in the end or the beginning of a fiscal year because the department either squirrels away money hoping they can do it, or they get their money and it's like, yeah, let's go do this, And so basically our workload in the summer is always through the roof, And rather than just redirect help desk folks to literally spending most of their time configuring workstations and those sorts of things, if we can set up an intern program, we can kind of, have some extra labor on that short term, provide an educational service to people, to IT, people that are in colleges, that need this real world experience.
We are not in the education business. We are in the business of delivering county services to county voters. So
Well, we do give the interns the opportunity, I guess.
as long as the emphasis is on delivering services.
Oh, absolutely,
absolutely.
absolutely. But I mean, it's the real world experience of doing these
No,
things
I
that
get
they're
that.
learning in the classroom. Absolutely, And the last piece of my staff request is basically I've asked Mark, and he wholeheartedly agrees after we went through the money of some dedicated money for overtime next year for the help desk. So, the help desk support folks. And that's simply because it's a reflection of what we're already doing. The average help desk support person probably works about 39 hours a week. Thus far, we're able to manage it because we've had people come and go. We've had positions that have not been filled for periods of time, and we've done certain comp time things because we have new employees, and they need the comp time to get back as vacation time. So for the past 2 years, I've been able to manage it within our budget. But I don't see that as being the case that next year. And I'm trying to, basically keep the level of service and not have to literally kick back the number of help desk hours, in order to conform to the fact that they are hourly employees and not salaried employees.
Okay.
I have a question. You have in here a plan to implement a chargeback system with the commission?
Well, that,
Does that mean that the person who currently works there is going to move to your department?
no,
No? How will that work?
well,
You want me to take this one since I kind of put the poo-poo on it?
well, that's, yeah, I think it's kind of, basically, we're still talking about,
I think what John's analysis helped me is actually Bill's salary is paid for in the commission. And it works out just
Oh,
based
Bill's-
on John's,
yep,
yeah,
But
he's
you
in the
don't work over
commission.
there,
no,
physically?
right.
No,
Okay.
but what John's analysis shows me is pretty much, we're very close to what the commission pays is basically what covers Bill's salary and his benefit package.
Yeah.
So for me, the chargeback system, I wasn't thrilled with because I think it's more work for the same result, I guess is what I'm saying. So when John and I went over this budget, I kind of said, well, it's something I'm willing to look at in the future, kind of on a global basis for the whole county,
Right.
including, the registry, Cape Light Compact because of their revenue sources and those types of things. But right now, I think it's going to create more kind of accounting paperwork than it really needs to do.
Yeah.
So the
It's
interesting-
demonstrated that what Billy's salary and his benefit package covered by the commission, that's kind of the level of service that they're getting.
Right.
So we can point to that if someone said, well, wait a minute, how much money from the commission fund is going to cover that? We have some
So that-
confidence that it's a good level, what we're charging them.
So that might be something that you want to plan for the future?
Yeah,
but
it's
not
something I would certainly
necessarily
look at.
this year.
Yeah, just not yet.
Yeah.
The other question I have is, how much of this budget represents the completion of your strategic plan? How far does it take you? Halfway there, three-quarters of the way?
We're on track in terms of expenditures. What we have in here are the year 2 of the plan expenditures, which do amount to, in terms of the capital request, amounts to basically 150,000 of the capital requests in and of itself, is directly related to responding to the strategic technology assessment year 2 activities. So we're on schedule in terms of that. It is year 2. Year 3 is the largest year in terms of capital request, but hopefully by actually having these other more operational issues funded this year and out of the way. Some of the big things in the capital requests are upgrading to the entire county to the newest version of Microsoft Office. That's a huge expense. I think it's about $80,000, unfortunately.
Wait a minute. Before I know how important it might be to continue with an existing, word processing and PowerPoint, but there are other alternatives they use by the school systems, like Open Office.
Oh, I'm well aware of those.
Okay.
Contractually, we have a lot of systems that we're contractually bound to Microsoft Office. Whether you'd like to talk about Munis or whether you'd like to talk about the laboratory inventory management system down, we're bound to. So, where we need it for such a large portion of our users anyway, then again, if you're bringing in 2 systems, then again you're increasing the burden on IT to manage 2 different systems. If we're going to go to Open Office for 30% of the people, but we need to keep the other 70 on Microsoft Office.
Everybody can use Microsoft.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess that was my other question. How much of the software applications you have now are used by everyone? And what percentage would be special? I know financial is different. But
Well,
I mean,
it's
the
not
Munis
actually-
operations could
Actually,
be used by everyone.
Munis is something that we're going to increasingly be rolling out to more of our...
Doing the procurement pieces and all of that?
Yeah,
in
I think
Munis?
procurement is pretty decentral now. What we're going to decentralize is kind of the payroll and our
Yeah.
timesheet implementation piece.
Yep.
Yeah, I participated in a Munis upgrade when all new kinds of operations were, where everyone had to do. You could do your own procurement,
Right.
and all of that could be done through Munis, and
Right.
it worked really well, and you got a lot of good feedback.
Yep.
Each department was able to receive good financial feedback from the Munis system,
Yeah.
so that would be
And I actually, in my major software systems request, there's $15,000 for FY12, in which one of the things that we're going to do is take all of the wonderful information that's in Munis in terms of payroll, our benefits, our particular tax information, and basically set up what's called Munis self-service so that our employees can necessarily look up their own accruals directly from Munis without having to bother Mark's staff in payroll for that information. Or they could potentially, even if they want to make a change to their number of deductions for a year, they can potentially enter that into something, into a secure web page that simply would send that information to your person, so that we're not necessarily passing paper around about all of that stuff. It's a lot of fully. It's a service that Munis offers that we've done one demo on. I actually had a demo with Gail Coyne from the Cod Commission, and she at the end of it was like, this absolutely would be such a benefit to the county to be able to offer all of this information to employees, securely, of course, but to kind of streamline services, but also sharing of that information. I should be able to see that information that's about me, and for instance, if I thought maybe I filled out my deductions wrong, I should be able to check it before bothering Robin or payroll to say that something's wrong. So
there are several major corporations that allow you to do that now. A lot of employees that do that. So that's just sort of.
So what is the total percent increase in your budget, did you say? Or your proposed budget?
The proposed budget's, what's it, about 110 more?
$1.2 million, which is existing budget's a little under 500. So it's more than double.
Right.
I would say though that, and I've said this to John, the positions are going to be a tough road to hoe for 2012. You've seen the kind of budget picture last year, and we'll probably get into that more after we're done with IT. So that's going to be a difficult thing. I think some of the needs that he has there, position-wise, we may be able to fill with contractual, maybe continue on that road, boost that up a little bit. But most of that money, as John has said, it's capital money. And maybe actually I would like him to go now. I think you've kind of gotten the position picture. There's 3 numbers in here: the telephone system, the major software system, which he's spoken just a little bit about, and the wide area network that I think he should go into a little bit more and give you a picture of kind of what the needs are. Yeah. Capitalized.
Definitely. And as Mark said, we have gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, and depending upon what the final numbers are, I think Mark understands now that I've got a really good handle on what are the priorities in here as well. So we'll be able to deal the best we can with whatever number we actually get. But this is based on, there's not a heck of a lot here that isn't pretty strong needs, or I would have delayed it basically. Within the phone system, which is a $125,000 capital request, which is an increase over, I guess, $12,000 we had this year. $70,000 of that basically is for major upgrades to the system. Basically, while we've had this phone system in place for only about 15 months countywide, we have had it running in the Cape Cod Commission for over 3 years now. And a system like this takes about a year for a vendor to ramp up and get. So basically the software and the various parts of the system is over 4 years old, basically, at this point. It is several revisions behind what is current. And at this point in time, in order to move forward, for instance, Cape Light basically would like to move up to the newest version of their call center. Well, that their call center software requires that our phone system be at the current level. There are some other things that folks have asked for, can we do with voicemail? And the answer is, well, no, not without upgrading the system, basically. It's the level that we are at on these systems is basically just about out of support from Cisco themselves. So it becomes pretty crucial that we do these upgrades. And the reason basically While on the face of it, $70,000 doesn't seem that much when you're talking about a system that we probably invested $300,000 in. I still think that's a lot of money, but it's complicated by the fact that these software upgrades, unfortunately, are going to require that we replace some of the server hardware in it as well, because, again, 4 years,
Everything changes.
everything changes, exactly. So, that's the number one.
Excuse me, what are you basing this periodicity on? Is that an assumption that there's at least 4 years of useful life in any of these systems?
No, he said the time frame, Bill, from when we started doing this at the commission, which was the kind of phase one, to now has basically been 4 years.
Yes.
Okay.
And since that time, we haven't upgraded the software, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So, basically, we're looking for, there are some hardware we need to bring in for other sites off the main campus to make sure that 911 works appropriately. We want to study the video abilities of this phone system, what's built in. I mean, I'm sure you folks all see those Cisco commercials basically all the time about unified communications. I mean, that is basically the system that we have. We're using it just as a phone system. What else can we do to kind of get the max out of the infrastructure that we built?
Exactly. Okay.
So now we get to the part, the max out of the infrastructure and the possibility of including the virtual, say, participation of the community in what we're doing.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons we want to look at how we can leverage the system. Absolutely, to see, you've raised
To satisfy your need.
Exactly. Yes. You've raised that issue before, and there's a lot of things that we can start to look at. And I mean, I'm really hopeful that we're starting to get, a base amount of IT hours to actually, do those and spearhead those and coordinate those between the folks who have the needs and the vendors and actually pull it off,
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions?
No,
I just wanted him to touch on, he sort of talked about the major software systems and the big upgrade on the Windows piece.
Yeah.
I notice more and more often when I call up either a spreadsheet or it goes through a little conversion process to convert it back to my old Stone Age software.
Yeah, I was talking to my son a couple of weeks ago, and he was finally forced to pick up the new version of Microsoft because he was having his assistant do the downloading. He was the last one at the Bank of America in Atlanta.
So that's a key piece, and it's a big
Yeah.
part of that 158,000 number you see there. But I just want John to talk about the last number, the 200,000, the wide area network piece, if you would.
Yeah. That is the single biggest of the capital requests. However, of that, basically 200,000, 112, the single biggest chunk of that is what we're basically calling our server virtualization and consolidation project. That is the project required under year 2 of the strategic technology assessment. And basically what we're doing is creating an enterprise approach to data storage and building redundancy and also bringing our servers. We have a bunch of servers that Billy and I set up when we formed this department 5 years ago that are aging in place quite rapidly. We have a bunch of servers as well that we inherited from departments from before. So it's kind of like it's recycling the fleet, but it's doing a heck of a lot more than that. We're designing this with basically a blade technology, which is thinner, greener technology than the traditional servers that we've had. So we're looking to be not just be on the cutting edge, but also to use less power to, as we move to our new server room, require no more than the current level of energy that we're using to cool those servers, but have an awful lot more to offer departments in terms of ability to store data. And we're going to have much better ability to manage it. There's going to be basically online copies in 2 different methods with this system, basically online backups, but also for the networking piece that required to be running on our servers, we'll have a copy of each networking
Cloud
piece.
is coming to Barnstable County?
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's a very similar design, exactly. It's a very similar design.
Well, since it's a similar design, is that something that could use the existing configurations to do that?
Not for part of this. You don't want to outsource the security portion, obviously. And then in terms of base data of things, it doesn't make a lot of monetary sense to to outsource some of the really basic needs too. And then of course the operational requirements of several of these major applications, again, like Munis or LIMS, we want to keep those. The best way to secure our data is to keep it on campus. So for the most part, no. I'm sure there'll be some things that won't be in this because they will operationally make more sense to be somewhere else. But this is based on an analysis that Billy did of all the current data, what we needed to offer, going forward into the future, and therefore coming up with a number of what we needed to make this happen.
And the other thing I just want to mention, a lot of the stuff that, of course, John talks about is in the basement and nobody sees it, and kind of, but it's the crucial piece of kind of operations behind the scene, the backbone, if you will. But one of the things that's in the budget that I support, and I know you will support, is that there's some money for the community resource room that we're building up at the new jail.
Right.
It's also envisioned to be kind of a smart training room,
Yep.
so that we can use it for both RDPC training, IT training, all
Maybe a
kinds of
smart
training.
board up there. and all
Exactly.
that
And I
sort of
think
thing.
Absolutely.
you guys, we see envisioning you using it as a meeting room.
Yes.
And,
In
Excellent.
an office? After all these years?
I don't know about an office, Bill, because then you could use this room more as your office, but it becomes your meeting room and kind of the central, has a nice auditorium sort of look to it, if
Right.
you will.
Might give the impression that we actually welcome the public to come in.
Yeah, it'll be a much nicer space, a bigger space.
And it's been quite interesting. There's been a tremendous, when I talk about just the county training room piece, the amount of groundswell that those discussions have created is just unbelievable. Basically, and I understand, like for instance, the Commission's GIS folks, they have quarterly meetings. There are a lot of, in terms of ESRI, the software that most towns use for their GIS, to be able to have them come down here and basically put computers in front of everybody and do kind of show and tell and training, on site. Now those things have to be, Cape Cod Community College, if you can rent one of their classrooms, is about the only place to do it,
There's another place you can do it in the county. The jail. The jail has that set up there for part of the, to receive the rehabilitation.
Even up in Bourne, the new jail.
Yeah, the new jail, it has all that in there. And it might be a place to take a look to see that that model, has any transferability.
Yep. So that's the basics of
I
what
just
we're
want to comment on the intern program because when I worked in Plymouth, the Plymouth High School, the high school and the technical school were all in the same building, and which made it great for the school system because their students could access all the other core curriculum classes that they didn't have to provide separately. But we had some of the seniors come over in their senior year, and it turned out that a couple of them actually got hired right after graduation from high school because they were so good at what they did, and then they learned the whole municipal piece as well.
Yep.
So that would be a great job creation.
Right, a feeder
Like a
for
farm
local
team.
kids,
Yeah,
for
develop your
local
farm team.
young people
Yeah.
coming in with that expertise. And let's face it, that's where a
There's
lot
only
of
so
them are
much
right
you
now.
can learn in the classroom.
Right.
Once you get
They
out
need that.
to the field, you really learn
Yeah.
what's going on. And we have these programs. George does the beach monitoring program every summer, plus he usually has someone in the lab. John Blaisdell has summer kids come in and help him with some of the facility stuff. So it's not something that we haven't done in other areas. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Right, and Human Service, Beth is
Human
always
Service,
trying to
yeah.
do it.
Yep.
Yeah, so
And
it makes a lot of
great.
sense.
It may benefit the towns too, because certainly these kids, the real world experience they're going to get is working for a government,
Right.
in terms of IT. And you work with all the towns much
Right.
more than I do.
Right. They
From an
all have
IT
their
perspective, they're hurting a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we might be some transferability there.
Absolutely.
So.
No, I think it's great. Well, I'm glad to see it's all on track. And my last question is, do we see Brian about our phones and connecting? Is that the person we'll go to, or do we go to you? Or Billy?
Well, question.
It's not me, I can tell you that. I'm not the best one.
That's why I'm asking.
We'll probably put both. Why don't we put both? Why don't we put
Yeah.
you and Ryan on?
Yeah.
We'll do
Yeah.
a tag.
Yeah, we'll
we
do
were-
it. I mean, I'm wondering if
After
you're on
the
this
meeting?
afternoon, it shouldn't take long.
Yeah,
You know,
After
you
we're
come
done
over
here,
after the
maybe
meeting.
we could stop
I
up.
was just gonna do
Yeah,
county
okay.
commissioners and
Okay.
shared.
Can you wait? Because I
Yeah,
have a call at
okay.
10:30, or it shouldn't be long.
Sure, yes.
Great.
I'll go in
Thank you
the
very
other-
much.
Very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Good.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, pause for a tape change.
Yeah, why don't